For those of you who are just joining us, my name is Jason Brett, and we run these product coffee workshops or sessions every single week, almost. We do them on Wednesday mornings, and we sit around. We're a bunch of product people who get together, drink coffee or whatever we're drinking, and talk product stuff to help each other have more impact, more influence in our organizations, and accelerate our career growth. And we're glad you could be here with us today. We're going to be talking today about being outcome driven, and specifically using KPIs, OKRs, and Northstar metrics. This is going to be a town hall discussion. So a lot of what I want to do real quickly is just ask everybody to jump in chat right now and answer this question on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being completely focused on customer outcomes and 1 being not focused on customer outcomes at all. How would you rate your current organization, and if you're currently looking for a new role, look at your last organization. How would you rank your current organization on their degree of focus on customer outcomes in product strategy? So we got here, I see a 3, 4, 5. Yes, 5. Got a lot of 5s here. Got a 1, 4, 5. Excellent. 2.5 right in the middle. A couple of 2.5s. 3, 5. So we've got some real strength in the room. Some folks working with some really strong companies. I see some 2s and some 2.5s. I saw a couple of 1s flowing and some right in the middle. So the goal here today is to set a mental model and build a mental framework for thinking about how to measure things in such a way that you can help to create alignment around customer outcomes in your own organization. And my hope here is those who are in organizations that are doing it really well can share some examples and can share some stories, and anonymize things as much as you need to, and talk about some philosophies that are driving your success in that space. And for those of you who are in companies that are on the weaker end, talk about some of the challenges that you're facing, and let's work together to overcome some of those. I'm going to talk about a couple of some framework definitions to kind of help everybody get started, and then we'll break off into some breakout rooms and do some small group discussions and come back together near the end as well. So let's start though real quickly with outcomes versus outputs in the first place. And I may put somebody on the spot here in a minute, so especially if you answered 5 there, be thinking about it for a second. I'd like to really talk about your perspective and understand some of your experiences with shifting from output-focused product management and strategy in your organization to an outcome focus, and kind of some of the hallmarks where you see differences in organizations that you've worked for maybe in the past and maybe in the current. I'd really like to hear some stories about wins that come from making that transition. And if anybody wants to raise their virtual hand using the reactions panel, that'd be great. If not, I would love, because I know he talked about this on a panel a couple of weeks ago, I'd love to tag John Harmer and get you to talk about that concept just a little bit and some of the experiences that you've had.
Yeah, sure. So Google does a pretty fantastic job of being outcome focused. And it all starts from the way we measure both product people and engineering folks who build the things. And honestly, it bubbles out from there to UX and everybody else too. But we're measured on kind of like, in terms of impact, 2 things. One of them is your impact on the project. Like, as a product manager, what would have happened if you hadn't been there, presumably. And then the other one is that project's impact on the company, or on the goals and the metrics, right? We do things with OKRs, and that's how we'll track those kinds of things. But the key is, like, did this project matter? This product, this launch, whatever the thing was, did it matter? Did customers care? Did they adopt it? Did it change their world in any way? And performance reviews, promotion decisions, all of that are based on that. There's also some other elements to it, but for the purposes of avoiding being a feature factory, that's how you get measured. And the way we talk about it in addition to just the impact thing is we also talk about landings, not launches. So it's great that you were talking about that with Tim from Jabber, right? It's great that you launched a thing. Did it land? Like if a product launches in the forest and no one is there to buy it, it doesn't matter. And so like, it's great that I work at Google and that's how they've done things and how they do things. It makes it much easier for me to be outcome focused. It is hard for you at whatever companies you may be at to change the incentive and performance management structures. So I appreciate that. There are ways you can sort of influence your orgs to do these kinds of things, and that it's starting by setting metrics and goals and things like that are customer outcome focused, and then doing your best to tie customer outcomes to your necessary business outcomes, because it's great if the customer is awesome. That was super weird. Jason froze and then became the host. It's great if the customers adopt a thing, but if you can't sell it profitably, if it doesn't affect your business in a useful way, then like who cares there as well, right? So it's a pair of outcomes you need to consider, and that was one of the things. If John Mansour was here, he would talk about the difference between customer outcomes in your business outcomes. Is Jason gone? I think
I'm back, but I was muted. Can you hear me? There you go.
Yes.
Welcome back, buddy.
I have no idea what happened. I thought everybody had frozen on me and realized very quickly that doesn't happen. It's if everybody froze and I'm the problem, but we got it reignited. So I don't know. We shouldn't have any more. But I knew you were talking, so it'd be fine.
I kept talking until I hoped you're back. So
I appreciate that. Way to stretch the time. Stretch it. All right. Thank you. Andy says, first step, admit that you have a problem. All right. So admit that you have a problem. Okay. Thank you, John. Anybody else have anything that you'd like to contribute on that, or war stories or perspectives on the nature of outcomes versus outputs and the shifting mindset there?
I'll just think
I can maybe add. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You started first. Go ahead.
No problem. I'll make it brief. But I had similar challenges at my previous company, and what I did is actually we're very output focused. What's the feature coming, right? So what I did is actually put in parallel more of an outcomes model, and then over time, this took quarters to years. People start our first circle of people, some of the leaders start to see like, oh, I actually care about the metrics more than the feature itself. And so that was a good way to start making that transition, because you didn't abandon your typical roadmap that everyone's comfortable with, and you can get this going in parallel and eventually kind of start making that switch over.
Yeah.
And I'll add to that too. Like when I remember as a junior product manager being focused on outputs, right? Because I didn't really know any better. And I think when you get started, it's a lot like that. But as you mature into the product manager role, it becomes pretty self-evident that outcomes are really the measuring stick. And I try to coach more junior product managers in that same direction today.
Yeah, and it's really easy to understand how that happens, because the types of type A personalities that are typically attracted to a product management role speak in terms of getting results. And when you're less mature in your career, results are something that you can see, and it feels like getting results means getting productivity and getting things out. Steve Jobs is famous for saying real product managers ship. And that's an important concept to keep in mind. But to your point, the real results that matter, and when you go back to John Doerr's book, the title is Measure What Matters. The question is, are we really measuring what matters? And matters to whom is the other part of the question. As we start shifting in this world toward, as we've been making this massive shift in philosophy towards human-centered design and really being more customer-centric in our products over the last 20 years, that even causes us to have to go back and reevaluate exactly what we're measuring in the first place. And even when we get beyond output and start thinking about, are we focused on business metrics, internal business metrics, or are we focusing on our customers' metrics and what matters to our customers? And that brings us to the idea of KPIs and OKRs and Northstar metrics. And I think everybody's pretty much familiar with those three concepts. Some of you may have heard the term Northstar Metric and may not have taken as deep a dive into what that actually is. So just real quickly at a high level to frame the conversation that we're going to have for the rest of the day is, KPIs are quantifiable measurements that you use to evaluate success on some important towards some important target. They tend to be measured something that you can watch in a tighter frequency. You can look at KPIs in some cases on a daily basis or even an hourly basis. Tend to be evaluated on months or quarters basis on and reevaluated with a little bit longer horizon. But they're the type of measures that you look at fairly frequently to understand, are we going in the right direction? Is the work that we're doing having the right kinds of impact on the business or on the customers? OKRs, on the other hand, are a framework for setting and communicating goals. And they use KPIs as kind of part of an OKR. You have an objective and key results is what OKR stands for. And the key results are often what you would think of as KPIs, but they're used to measure, are we making progress toward the objective that we've set in our OKR? And the cool difference between KPIs in my mind and OKRs, and I'm going to welcome John or anybody else to challenge me on my assertions about OKRs, because I am certainly not in the organization that has built its entire culture on it like Google has. But at the same time, OKRs, the cool thing about them and how those things interplay is OKRs value not only progress toward the goal, but they value learning and improving overall in your organization, in your efforts. We have an objective. We've determined how we're going to measure whether we're approaching success in that objective. And it gives us a framework for evaluating on an ongoing basis, what could we do? What could we change? What have we learned in the activities that we're undertaking in order to achieve that objective? And I think that's one of the really cool things about OKRs, because it's a framework that is designed for learning, where KPIs are simply designed for measurement and nothing else. So I'll pause there for a moment and see if anybody has any questions, thoughts, or additions that they'd make to that commentary on KPIs versus or along with OKRs. Silence. We'll keep going. And then there's Northstar. Go ahead. Yeah, go for it.
I just want to make sure I followed everything you said. Basically, what you said is the OKRs, objective key results, are clear statements of the desire and goal that we can use to communicate what we're after towards other people. And it should be pretty clear that either we passed or we hit it, or we failed and we didn't, or why didn't we? Whereas the KPIs are more the stats that you can see day by day, ideally, to measure your progress towards hitting the OKRs, so you know how the progress is going and how you need to adjust to hit them.
I would tweak that just a little bit. First of all, one thing that I left out is OKRs tend to be measured and evaluated on a quarterly basis, or quarterly, sometimes even an annual basis, but quarterly is where I tend to see it most. So the slight addition that I would make to what you said is that the objective is a lofty goal that isn't quantifiable in its nature. It is not it's not a yes or no necessarily. It could be a yes or no, but it's not necessarily a yes or no. The key results, are KPIs that are absolutely measurements that tell us how we're proceeding toward that goal. Now, there are a lot of different thoughts about how to deploy OKRs, and one of my favorite books on the topic is by Christina Wadke, and it's called Radical Focus. And one of the things that really brought home the power of OKRs to me is that if you're setting your key results properly, which are those quantifiable measurements, if you're setting them properly, you're not ever going to achieve all of them. You're going to maybe achieve half of them over time. Because what you want to be doing is you're setting an objective that is inspirational, exciting. You roll out of bed. If we go solve this, we're going to change the world. We're going to change our lives. We're going to change our customers' lives. And those key results need to cause you to stretch and reach. They need to be achievable, but you need to have a hard enough ones to achieve that you probably aren't going to make them all. So if you achieve all of them, then you set your bar too low. If you achieve none of them, you set it too high and you risk demotivating yourself. So you want to set stretch goals, but that are absolutely achievable. And finding that balance is half the challenge of successfully implementing OKRs in any organization. John, I see you took your mic off.
Yeah, it's super hard to do and to get that right. But the goal at Google is 0.7 on the scale of 0 to 1 for your OKRs is perfectly acceptable. Like that is what you should get on average, is like basically 70% achieved. If you see that you've gotten a whole bunch of ones, that means you aren't trying hard enough. You're not setting lofty enough goals. And then, as you said, if it's like 0.3s, 0.5s, whatever, that means your goals are either too lofty or you failed to execute. And either way, that doesn't reflect well on you. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, an example of an OKR, if I'm a fitness company, is I might set an objective of helping half my customers achieve their fitness goals in a time period, or helping all my customers achieve their fitness goals. So you could measure that as a yes, I achieved it, or no, I didn't achieve it, but you're setting a pretty lofty goal there that has a lot of variables that you can measure underneath it, a lot of key results that you can measure underneath it to say, are we doing the things that are taking us in that direction? And you're going to learn from that work as you go, so that next time you come around to set an objective, you will likely have a different objective based on what you've learned from this last objective. Now, some people roll OKRs over to subsequent quarters and tweak the key results. I'm a fan of trying not to do that, but sometimes it's just that's a battle not worth fighting in a lot of cases.
Thank you.
Yep. So let's jump over to Northstar Metrics, which is the third concept. And Northstar Metrics are very different, and a lot of people they've heard this term, and what is the one metric that you focus on that everybody should know and everybody should understand? But a more specific definition is the single metric that guides. It's an overarching metric that guides the growth of a team or a company, and generally it's thought about mostly at the company level. Now, there are some exceptions to that when you have a really diversified company like an IBM that has lots of different divisions. Google has lots of different divisions as well. I don't know if you have a single North Star for the entire company, but I can imagine that there are a lot of fundamentally different business units that would benefit from their own North Star that would make sense. I wouldn't necessarily say you have a North Star for every product in a product portfolio. You're generally it's going to be at a much higher level than a single product as a general rule. But where North Stars are different is that they should be completely focused on customer value, on the value that you're creating and how you're measuring the value that you as a business are creating. Where people get it wrong is very often a North Star metric will be something as simple as we're going to improve our margin in our business over the course of the next year. And that's not a North Star metric. That's just a goal. That's just a metric-driven goal. But a North Star metric is going to encapsulate your whole company's value proposition. One of my favorite examples, and I believe that it's not actually their North Star metric, if I'm not mistaken, but it's a good illustrative example. If you take a company like Airbnb, an example of a North Star metric for an Airbnb would be booked nights booked in an Airbnb facility. And the reason that's a really valuable North Star metric for them is it captures the whole value proposition. If I've got a high number of nights booked through the Airbnb system, then I have a high number of renters who are renting rooms, and I have a high number of property owners who are offering their rooms and are successfully making revenue for offering their rooms. So if I'm looking at that one number, it encapsulates that I am enabling both sides of the market to be successful in their journey. And then every other product, every other organization within the company can look at that number and say, how am I contributing to helping us maximize the number of nights rented? What can I do? What can my organization, what can my team, what can my product do? So you may have, with KPIs versus OKRs, they're generally short-term or mid-term, quarterly, or maybe a little bit more. They have key results, which are KPIs as part of them. Northstars are the single overarching metric that everything can contribute towards. And then you have Northstar metrics, which you're generally going to have just one of those. So nuanced framework. But then the other side of that discussion, and I want to break off into some breakout groups here in just a minute. The other side of that discussion is what we're actually measuring. And this is the other side that people often struggle with. Even with KPIs, there's a real need to have internally business-focused KPIs. So just drop in the chat there for a minute some of the KPIs that you're used to focusing on and reporting on. If people just start dropping some KPIs that you've experienced in the past in there. MAU, monthly active users. Time to hello world. I like that. Charging lag. Certain increase in revenue. Average savings per claim edit. We're going to come back to that one. User adoption of new features, website traffic, conversion rate, customer satisfaction score, employee engagement score, net promoter score. Yep, big KPIs that are often a subject of focus. So there's a good mix in there, and I would ask you to think about this and talk about it a little bit. There are business-centric KPIs, and then there are customer-centric KPIs. Website traffic's a great example of a business-centric KPI. We're measuring something the business cares about. Our customer doesn't care one iota how much website traffic we have, right? That reflects no benefit to them. It is a measurement that for us, that people may be valuing our website. Lifetime value, churn, net promoter score, those are all inwardly focused business metrics. Even NPS, which it claims to be a customer-centric measurement, I don't think of it as such. I think of it as kind of a vanity metric more than anything. A more customer-centric method view would be time saved, tasks completed, as opposed to website visits. How many things did I actually achieve? Goals achieved. Those are the types of things that you can measure as KPIs that are truly customer centric. Now, in a business world, we have to kind of do both on the KPI side of things. But what I see is too often I see a lot of people don't do enough of the customer centric KPIs. So when we go off into our breakout rooms in a moment, one of the things I'd like everybody to do is kind of talk about the KPIs that you're using and break them into those two categories. Are these business centric or customer centric, and challenge each other if necessary, kind of hold each other accountable to that. OKR is an example of an internally focused OKR is improve NPS by 20% this quarter. I mean, yes, that's a valuable OKR. That's a valuable objective to achieve. But once again, we are asking whether our customers would recommend us to someone else. And yes, that is a potential signal that our customers are gaining value from us, but it's not explicit. It's a signal of whether we can count on our customers to refer people to us. On the other hand, an objective for an OKR that's more customer centric is the example I gave a minute ago. Help half of our users achieve their fitness goals this quarter. We're focused on what the customer outcome is and how can we measure that. And how can we build our systems and build our work around achieving that customer-centric goal? Same thing for Northstar metrics. We could talk about active users and making sure that, you could almost argue that booked nights is almost like an active users, but it's not, because it's an outcome-focused metric. So it's a successful customer outcome achieved, and it's brilliant for Airbnb because it measures both sides of their market, both the renter and the property owner. So any thoughts or commentary on those kind of comparisons, other examples of really great customer focused KPIs that you've used in the past? All right, so what I want to do for a few minutes is, it is 12:34 Eastern right now. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to drop people in groups of about 3 and just get you to share what you introduce yourself real quickly to each other, share real quickly with each other what some of the KPIs, OKRs, and Northstar metrics that you've used in the past. And if you're in a confidential situation, you don't have to give away any trade secrets. You can anonymize some things and extract them. We're smart product people here. But what I really want to do is whatever you kind of create your comparison to, look at, is this an internally business focused measurement, or is this a customer focused measurement? And help each other focus more clearly on customer focused measurements where you're struggling to do that. And then we'll come back in a few minutes. I think I'll give us about 15 minutes, and we'll come back and elect someone from your group to talk about some of your takeaways from the discussion today. So introduce yourselves, talk about your KPIs, OKRs, Northstar metrics. Are they business-centric or customer-centric? And then come back and elect somebody to come back and talk about your takeaways from that discussion. Sound good? All right. So I'm going to set up the breakout rooms. I'm going to set up a whole bunch of them. If your breakout room disappears, I'll keep an eye on it and I'll move you to another room. So here we go. All right. And for those of you on YouTube, we will be on pause here for about 15 minutes or so. I will bring everybody back together in the room, in the main room here at about 10 minutes until the top of the hour. And then we'll kind of continue that discussion. So grab yourself a cup of coffee. If you're out there on YouTube still, we got a few of you out there. Feel free to kind of drop some stuff in the chat and kind of chat amongst yourselves. And if not, we'll hope to see you on the Zoom call next time. Feel free to join us on the live Zoom call. And we'll be back here shortly. All right, welcome back, everybody. And let's see, we can make it so that people can unmute themselves as needed. And so, hey, everybody. We kept everybody through the breakouts. I did bad math in my head. I have to apologize. I meant to put everybody in groups of 3. Most of you ended up in groups of 2. I'm sorry for that, but you got a little bit more intimate time. Because that's what we're all about here at Product Coffee, is workplace intimacy in entirely appropriate ways.
Not the outcome we're looking for, I don't think, but yeah.
All right, so let's take a look here. We got just a few minutes left. I would love to hear some of the takeaways from the different breakout rooms, and let's just start with room number 1. Tell me a little bit. That was the room that had Dustin, Jonathan, and Mark.
Trying to find that unmute button. I'll go ahead and speak with the group, I guess. And anyone else, please feel free to jump in. We actually ended up talking more about the philosophy of OKRs and our individual OKRs. A lot of us it sounded like have had experience with them. and we discussed kind of how we communicate with those OKRs across the company and gain alignment. Talked about things like not using the buzzwords outside of our internal stakeholders, because you bring up OKRs to customers or clients and et cetera, and it's not always a good conversation because the buzzword throws them off, right? Talk about where you're headed, how you can help them, why you want to do these things, and the outcome you're looking to achieve versus the way you're going to measure it. So, yeah.
Definitely.
Great cool.
Just to add one more thing to it, we also discussed about how working with other people in the departments where they may have not come from a OKR or KPI metric background, and trying to work with them to work with the customers to get that information to make our jobs a lot easier.
Yeah.
The metrics have to have meaning to a customer. If you've got a metric that you're measuring your success on, and a customer wouldn't understand or relate to that metric, then are you really affecting their lives, or are you just doing something you think makes sense? And but it's all within the walls of your organization.
Yeah, and one of the things that we didn't talk about was really validating those concepts, but that brings a really important need to not only set the metrics, but then go validate that they're actually telling you what you need them to tell you.
Right.
So it's great. Thanks, guys. Let's go to room 2, which was Jennifer and Steven. Did you guys have some good takeaways to share?
Well, yes, we did. I can say that she and I were both talking in 2 different ways, because her product is definitely more user focused. So she has really user-based KPIs and objectives to discuss, where I was working more on federal government projects, which really they know a lot of what they want put into it. So we're not really measuring as much of the customer experience and how much the actual users work, but does the government get what they want out of the system in terms of information collected, information managed, and minimum system failure interruptions in doing it. So for me, like, KPIs would be a minimal number of level 1 outages and failures after we deploy a system, something like that. And also measuring the development team, how few bugs that did they develop per quarter in fixing these things. And so it's easier to fix it. They're doing a better job at developing them, which is that's more development than it is product. But that, in the federal work that we were doing, that's how that was working. For her, I'll turn it over to her to talk about the KPIs that she was discussing.
Yeah, so what I talked about with Steven is our group was so small. Since we're a small startup, I had the benefit of working customer success and doing product and operations. So I had that, yeah. I had that whole
air
vision.
quotes.
So my biggest goal for over the past year was really focusing on that customer support and bringing down those calls, because when you have 17,000 people that need to be cleared for an event that's on a specific day, we got to get them through quickly and easily without with a small team, we can't be handling thousands of support calls. So
and I'm curious, was the KPIs that you measured, it sounds like were specifically around support call volume or support queue. How would you take that and turn it and make it a customer outcome focused KPI addressing the exact same problem?
Yeah, I mean, my view was if the customer is satisfied by getting through the system easily. And yeah, I don't know how to measure that quantitatively, except for users getting through and being cleared to attend an event within that time period. So that was my measurement.
Yeah, I think you could absolutely measure the time spent dealing with support as a customer-centric customer outcome focus, because their ideal world is 0.
Exactly.
And so we can absolutely see what we're doing to measure getting closer and closer to that 0 for that customer. So that's very cool. That's a great dichotomy that you're looking at there between the two businesses that you're addressing, and thinking about metrics from a completely different perspective. It's really interesting. Let's see here. Let's first I'm going to go on to room 3, but we've only got few minutes left. So if somebody specifically is chomping at the bit to go, raise your hand up and we will try to pull you to the front of the line. But let's look at Hector and Jeffrey. So let us know what you guys took away.
Yeah, so we talked about the difference between the three frameworks of the Northstar and KPIs and OKRs, and kind of came to an agreement. I shared my way of actually understanding the difference between the three frameworks, and that really there's usefulness in doing all three. But the most important thing is that often we see confusion with companies that are actually adopt one or more of these frameworks when they're actually defining them, and very little communication between the executives and the senior management and the product management team that are going to be deploying all of these things once they go into implementation. And that's one of the biggest issues, because I think in the planning, you've got to have that clear communication and consistent communication between executives and senior management and the product management team to make sure that you're defining the right metrics that need to be that are needed for the business situation that you want to be able to solve. So that's really what we decided. But so an example is like, most people think that our Northstar metric is something that is going to be always achievable, and that's not necessarily the case. One example I want to cite is Southwest Airlines. Their Northstar metric is delivering superior customer experience. Are they 100% in any survey at any one time? No, they're not. But they're usually in the top three, compared to competitors in the same markets. And yes, conditions change, but they have lots of different ways that they measure, knowing that their North Star is all about collecting the voice of the customer to see how happy or unsatisfied they are with their experience every single time that they fly Southwest Airlines. Yeah. So it's continuous collection of that, but also then giving it to a team that says, how do we solve all these problems that are hard to solve because there are a lot of things, a lot of variables that we don't control? And what KPIs can we have in place that allows us to measure, that are leading indicators that allows us to whether or not we're going in the right direction quarter by quarter, year by year. And when there's even seasonality in demand, how do we make sure that we're true with delivering superior customer experience?
Yeah, and I'll add one thing to that. Like, you have to kind of even remember like what North Star means, right? Like, think of it as like, it's traditionally like a navigational reference point, right? It's a big point in the night sky, and it lets you know that this, you're finding. It lets you know you're working down like the best path to get to your destination. So like, it's easy to kind of dismiss that or not think about that, but. And I posted some in the chat for anybody who wants to know, just something I had bookmarked it on Twitter at some point for references, right? Because we talk about Northstar metrics, but it's kind of interesting to see what some other folks have forged.
Yep. That's a great post. Thank you for sharing that. Bang on, right? It is your guiding light, right? And that brings us to the top of the hour. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you, Hector. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, everybody who kind of spoke up here in the last few minutes. Had some great new folks join us today. It was really, we were really excited to have you here. You were a great part of the discussion. We're taking next week off. Next week is Product Camp Atlanta, and so there's going to be a lot of stuff going on there to prepare for that big event at the Georgia Aquarium. If you haven't already got your ticket, if you're in the Atlanta area or can come to the Atlanta area, better hurry up and do it. It's almost sold out. If it is sold out, jump on the waiting list and we'll try to release a ticket to you. And we still need some folks to propose some sessions. So if you'd like to speak at Product Camp Atlanta, it'd be great for you to propose a session for that. So with that being said, I want to thank everybody for being here. It was great to see you. We will see you back in 2 weeks, the first week of October, where we'll be starting a brand new series, and look forward to seeing you all then. Have a great week, everybody. Hope to see you tomorrow at the Stephen Wunker talk with the book club, or at the happy hour up in Alpharetta. Have a great week.